This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
And I think we're starting a new season of the Practical Prayer Podcast. This is episode number 169, so it's possible that this is season 15, although I'm not counting correctly. That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a whole lot. Yeah.
So that's what happens. You start doing something, and if you forget to stop, it just gets it gets mature.
Yeah. I like that. Forgets to stop. You know, it's just...
Some number of years ago, we had an arborist in our yard, and he was taking out a pine tree that was too close to the house. And out in the edge of where the pine trees are, there's a little oak sapling. He said, "We'll take this out too." I said, "Just leave it." Well, I'm now hiring another arborist to come in and trim that sucker because it's twice the height of the house. See? Well, that's what happens when you just start something and don't stop. So congratulations to us. Yeah.
I think so.
Spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you wanted to talk about today. And
yes,
but you had a slightly different twist on it because SBNR is the shorthand, spiritual but not religious. And you wanted to talk about spirituality, but not religion, which I think is a slightly different lane on the same highway.
We'll see, because it sounded it almost sounded the same. So. Let me just be clear, then. There is religion, a set of do's and don'ts and dogmas, etc.
Do's and don'ts and dogmas, yeah.
And judgment thrown in there.
Well, that's right. Okay.
And there is a reason for that. There are a couple of reasons for that. However, beneath that is spirituality. And I think it gets lost in the religious piece of it. I'm not prepared to throw religion out. I think it is misused. But when used properly, graciously, and lovingly, it's a dance. It's a dance that is important because it represents to me a level of discipline. And I think we have to have a little bit of discipline in the world or you'll burn the place up. But the spirituality is missing or buried so far beneath the judgment, rules, doctrines, etc., that you can live a lifetime, I think, without experiencing it and understanding it. And I think that's very sad. And the pandemic, do you maybe repeat that? The pandemic. Yeah. Well, the pandemic shook everything up, but certainly the world of the church, people weren't able to go to their place of worship, et cetera. And some were very happy about it. Now, look, don't bother getting mad at me. I'm just telling the truth. Some people were happy because they didn't want to go anyway, but they had, family tradition and guilt and all that rest of that crap that makes you go sit in the pew that you really don't want to go to and so forth. And when the pandemic was lifted, that was a good time not to go back, right? Because it was a lot of time in between, so people didn't go back. But
and
the
pandemic
void
didn't end; it kind of tapered off.
Yes. And it's still shades of it hanging around.
Yeah.
But then how does one reconcile themselves to, okay, now I don't have to be locked in this prison of rules and dogma that I had been. But what do I do? There's a level of guilt, right? Because there's God. And I want to still stay connected with God. And how do I do that? Because I was never really taught the spirituality and relationship with God as it truly is at a deeper level. And so there are people out there. And let me just throw this in really quick. In 2007 and beyond, I had an internet radio. When it first started, I had an internet radio show called Jazz Divine, and I played jazz music, and I did Bible study. And I had a humongous audience globally. It shocked the heck out of me because those people, there are people tuning in from countries that I didn't know anything about. But however, I was really surprised at the American audience that was there. And my little tagline was that this is for those who don't find their place in the local church because of whatever. And I didn't realize how many people there are that are like that. They want to have a relationship with God, Spirit, Jesus, whatever, all of that. But, just can't hack it. Just can't hack it in the pew. And they can't be judged and forgotten, but there's that void. So that's what I mean.
All right. Well, so there's plenty to talk about there. And like any one of those topics that you brought up would be an entire podcast episode. But, we've done 168 of them so far. Let's take another swing at it, and we'll come back and address the rest of them later if we need to. Okay. And the first piece of what you're saying, actually, let me work backwards in time. The pandemic gave everybody the requirement to stay home for some period of time. So that gave us a break. And that brought up the question of, what do I really want to do on Sunday morning? And for some people, and in my spiritual community in New Thought, Philadelphia, we all went home the second week in March of 2020, and we went on Zoom immediately because I'm pretty technical and I knew how to do that. And we knew how to do music on Zoom from the get-go, which most other people took quite a while to figure out how to do properly. And when it was time to come back, the place that we had been meeting wasn't available anymore because we were renters. We did church in a box. And so we were looking around for where we're going to go and who's going to be there and how do we put all that together. Simultaneously, there was the challenge that the congregation grew because we were on Zoom. People didn't have to be in the neighborhood. We're in Philadelphia, so people are going to be driving in from the suburbs and maybe coming in from New Jersey, and every once in a while they're going to make a long trip in from Delaware. But when on Zoom, we wound up with members and participants in the Midwest and in Southern California and Arizona, and there's somebody who had moved to Portugal, started coming by again. And it's wonderful to see them, but they're not going to come in if we do this in person. And then there are the people who are local, who live around the corner from me. And they say, yeah, I like getting together, but I also like sitting on my couch on Sunday morning and being in my jammies and not having to get up and go do something. And it makes it a half a day as opposed to an hour and 15 minutes. So the lifestyle change happened there. And this is in a spiritual community that has no judgment. It's New Thought. We don't do judgment. You're going to be here? Great. You're going to sleep with that person? Okay. As long as you're not hurting anybody, then we're, completely supportive and, let you be you and celebrate the good in that. But even in that group, it's like we're trying to figure out who we are. How do we want to be together? And what's my spiritual path and what's going to be uplifting for me? So when we get the church part out of it, then the question turns into, what do I want to have? Do I want to be in community with people who I can have something in common with and I can share my spiritual path with? Do I want to do that solo and touch base with them as necessary? And what does church mean to me? And to my way of thinking, church is about spirituality, and it's about community, and it's about structure. And when we're going to be in a spiritual community together, then we can really focus on the spirit part. We can really focus on the community service and connecting together, the community part, or we can focus on the rules. And it's kind of like the three legs of a tripod. If we don't do rules, then there's some subtle agreements about how we're going to engage with each other and the things that we're going to do. I mean, Don Miguel Ruiz wrote the 4 agreements, and those are a really good start to have the 4 agreements about who am I going to be and who are we going to be with each other. But there's not somebody in charge saying you have to follow, don't take things personally. It can be much more supportive. Religion, and, to my way of thinking, every religion was started by some prophet, by some enlightened individual who got it. I mean, we're talking about Buddha, we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about Moses, we're talking about the enlightened ones who understood something at a deep, fundamental level. They saw truth, they experienced truth, and they embodied that truth in a way that the people around them went, whoa, this guy's got it going on. I want whatever he got, I want some of it. And they started following them around and saying, how do you do that? How do you be enlightened? And unfortunately, and this is my opinion, enlightened people are really good at being enlightened and not necessarily that good at teaching other people what to do. Because they're enlightened. They're aware of the infinite. They're aware of how connected we all are. And so they start talking about stuff, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to the people who are around them, but they try to make sense of it because they want to write it down, because they want to be like their prophet, their guy. And then the rules that they write down about how to be like whoever started this become the religion. And sometimes it helps, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it's misguided, and sometimes it gets old. Religion is trying to follow and emulate whoever started the religion, even though that person is no longer there. And when it works, it's wonderful because we can build community around it, and we can do spiritual practice around it, and we can let go of second guessing ourselves because we're doing what the big guy said to do. And we can follow that path even though it's not obvious to us. And other times, it doesn't work for us at all. And it's like, why am I doing this? Who says I can't? Who says I have to? And one of my practitioners says that the spirituality is a connection with the divine and religion is crowd control. And
see, that's what I said something about discipline, didn't I?
Yeah. And, and then the religion turns into a church, turns into an organization, turns into a business. There are people who are employed doing that, and it winds up having a whole structure. And it's very uncommon to go back and revisit the fundamental structure and say, is this really what we as a group, as a collective community want to be doing? Because we've been doing this for a long time, and people have the jobs, and we're keeping it going because that's how we keep our church going. That's how we keep our religion going. And at the pandemic, I'm coming back around. I'm looping back around here. The pandemic came along and gave everybody permission to pause, to say, wait a second, is that really working for me? As you put it, do they want to be sitting in this pew with these people on Sunday morning? Mm-hmm. Can I make a religious experience out of the Eagles game? Do that on Sunday.
Yeah. I think, thank you. I really appreciate you going all the way around like that, though. I do. I do. So let's go back a little bit, because I think that let's say there was spirituality first. Let's say that. And then you have enlightened beings, and, things it gets multiplied. It becomes a collective consciousness of that enlightenment kind of thing. And it's wonderful. But what happens, that seems to always happen, is the institution or structure gets involved. And then once that happens, then you got bylaws and so forth, and their rules. And then you want everything, and everybody is, now here's the ego. So you're going to put this in the right place. I'm just throwing it out there, right? The ego says, I am the it. And in order for me to remain the it, I have to create questions in your mind that only I can answer. I'm the it that can answer the questions and keep, do you know what I mean? It takes on something different. And I think it was so subtle that it becomes a part of the way it is. So you can scarcely imagine a small community meeting comfortably and sharing and being taught and so forth, teaching one another. That's like satsang, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing now is not so much now, the mega church is really done, I think. I saw the end of that when it began. But, and I'm not being mean. I'm not.
No.
I think it just has to do with human nature. You got a lot of things clashing here. And a lot of times the mega church was just composed, tiny churches composed in this big gathering umbrellas, so you have cell groups and all that. So we have a need to be in fellowship and communion.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take 10,000 people on a Sunday for that to happen. It could be just okay with just 10 or 25 or whatever. Yeah. But then that doesn't do much for the ego of the leadership.
Oh,
and I mean, no offense. I'm not talking about you. Okay. I'm not talking about anybody.
We'll talk about revenue models. Okay. With a dozen people, there's, it's a circle that gathers in a living room.
Yes.
Or, in a relatively small space. And everything gets done by volunteers because there's probably not enough to support somebody working full time on behalf of the organization. And if they're going to do that, it's going to be the spiritual one who's leading them rather than they get tagged with all the administrative stuff. So you want it to be a little bit bigger so you can afford your own building, so that you can have some staff, so you can do a little bit of this, that you have enough money to repair the roof and the parking lots. And we want to do some community outreach, and we want to open up the fellowship hall, et cetera, et cetera. And you need more people to do that because that's where the abundance comes in, that there's going to be enough to go around to do all of the things that the community wants to do that none of the individuals on their own have the time to do. So there's a very good reason for building an organization to do that. And the church is building an organization based on the idea started by the prophet and passed down by the other people who have been in the organization for a while. And sometimes it's a great idea. And sometimes the idea is a little misguided. And at the core, it's people connecting with people in community, supporting each other. The important things before we started this, we were talking about weddings, and there's also funerals. And weddings are a lot of times church-based because we want to know that we're in a spiritual, emotional, mental, intellectual, family-connected kind of way. This is how life is unfolding, and there's christenings when a new baby comes into the group, and there are memorials and funerals when somebody leaves. And those are the ones where we want to have a spiritual context, and churches get to do that. And they're organized that way. And we were talking before about, the when the group gets together. And there's the person who's in charge, even if it's a small group. And you spend a whole bunch of time in charge. And I am absolutely certain, we've never talked about it, but I'm absolutely certain there was a time when sitting in some group meeting, somebody came up with something that was a problem, a quandary, a question, a dilemma. And they threw it out there to the group, and everybody kind of looked dumbfounded, like, oh, I've never considered this before. This is something that's challenging that I'd never even thought of as a challenge before. And then all the heads turned to you. And then you start saying something, and partway through you say, oh my gosh, I actually know something about this. I actually have a good answer for this. Because of the background that you had, because of the training that you had, because of the experience that you had. When these new situations come up and everybody's looking to you for leadership, you actually can provide it because you have been focused on that sort of thing. Now tell me whether that's happened.
It's happened. There's a but. There is a but. Honestly, there is a but, because always want to hear what you think we should do. Like, let's get it out on the table. Because I'm very comfortable with being the leader. I'm extremely comfortable with that. I know how to do it, but I also know that I don't know everything. And I could screw this up. Even though I probably won't, and I don't think I will, right? For the most part. And I'm saying that as a joke, but seriously too, I am never going to let you down. If you have a need to feel confident in leadership, I will be that. That's who I am. But at the same time, I don't want the last word, because God speaks to you too. And if I talk, then you're not going to listen to the God in you, which could be, like saying the God in Carol needs to step back. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. No, I completely understand. That's actually that's a separate part of the answer. But the first part of it is that all right, well, there's this question that's come up from the group and nobody has any idea. So, and I have a little bit of an idea, but I don't know if I'm right. But I do understand what we can do next to open up and let Spirit talk to us. And
can I comment on that?
Yeah.
I went to one church with my little, attitude about how we are collectively needing to think. And somebody pulled me aside and said, "You don't have good leadership skills." And I thought, why? Because they wanted me to tell them what to do. I can do that, but that leaves you out and others out that would like to be a part. You know what I mean? It's how are you going to grow? I don't need another little me. I'm cool with me, but I don't want to duplicate.
Right. I've actually had exactly the opposite experience, which was real informative. I've gotten myself into situations in business where I have no management role. I am not part of the leadership team. I am an employee doing a job. And the technique is called leading from behind. So nobody needs to call me a leader. Nobody needs to call me a manager. Nobody needs to say Bill's in charge. But by understanding what's possible and what the team is capable of, it is certainly possible for me to do exactly what the group was looking to you to do without being designated. So both happen. And I completely understand. I think that you show great leadership skills by letting the group decide.
I've left the room a couple of times. I've left the room and refused. And they got outside and said, "Well, I hope they think about this."
You know what sheep are without a shepherd?
What?
Sheep. They're still sheep. The shepherd is not there to make them any more sheep.
Yeah.
The shepherd is there to help keep them safe and help them choose the path around the pasture and the mountain. And so you don't fall into the river and drown. But without the shepherd, they're still sheep. They can still do all of their sheeping stuff. And the same thing that you're talking about, you can never find a shepherd when you need one.
I think unless I'm not wrong about this, that's part of spirituality, is helping people to grow and to become fully themselves and confident in who they are and testing themselves. You're not going to fall off the edge of the earth. Nothing's going to happen. You may be surprised that how you are able to step into who you are and your life will change. I've always been that way. And I don't think it really happens any other way. But if you're in a community that doesn't understand that kind of leadership, well, then there may be a bit of a problem. And I was 14 years old. I will never, ever forget this. I grew up in a huge church in West Philadelphia. And the congregation, the number on a Sunday was 500, 700 people. That was the mega church of those days. And so that to me was church. And a bishop came and he preached, and I'll never forget this. He said, a church should never grow beyond 350 people. When it begins to grow like that, you have to train up the leadership to be prepared to split the church and have two, right? Or three, you keep going like that. Now, that was unheard of in those days. It was unheard. But I heard that and I never forgot it, because I thought, as a leader, spiritual leader, it's my job to develop you in those ways that you can build spirituality that grows and permeates. And you can't do that with 700 people. You can do it, you split. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Listen, that never happened. I'm going to tell you. And because that wasn't popular. People don't, when they see 300, they want to see 400. If it's 400, let's go 500. And it gets big. And then that's why, where does religion overtakes and overshadows spirituality?
Yep.
I study a lot, and the principles are in the Bible, but they're like bullet points underneath things. And that's how it gets lost. It becomes religion, and spirituality that we so desperately need is lost, hidden, not lost, hidden.
Yep.
And then when you bring it forth, you're a weirdo. All right. Sorry. That's my rant for today.
And I will have a rant. We're actually going to take a break, and then I will continue with the rant. But the point I'll make before that is that we are all spiritual beings, and we're having a human experience. And where the two of those touch is our awareness of whether or not we're spiritual beings. And sometimes religion helps, and sometimes it doesn't. But we got more to talk about after the break.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the new thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione.
We're talking about spiritual, but not religion, and where the two of those touch and where they diverge. And what a wonderful conversation. What a wonderful way to be diving into this. Because I love going back to creation stories. And every religion was created, as we were talking before, by a prophet. And everything in the universe was created by one creative power, one source, one whatever. And no matter how you trace the story back, we are all connected. We are all part of that one. We are all that infinite divine love energy substance continuing to unfold and be revealed in everything that we are and everything that we do. And some people have some pushback when I say that. Some people buy right into it. They like the Big Bang story, or they like the scriptural story. And they're all the same story, and we have to get our head wrapped around that. But the important part is that this is an entirely spiritual creation. And it is not obvious to us that it is. It seems like it is very material. You know, we're all made of the particles that we're made up of, rather than that infinite quantum, whatever it is that connects us all. And spirituality is getting past the distraction of being human and remembering and connecting with the fact that we're spiritual beings and we can connect with each other on a spiritual level. And we go back and forth. Religion, when it's working well, is a great way of getting together with other people so that we can connect with our true spiritual nature. And other times when we just give up and say, I'm going to do what the guy at the church tells me to do because I don't have time to think about it or worry about it. I'm going to job this out. I'm going to let somebody else decide what my morality is going to be, what my ethics are going to be, what the rules are. So I don't have to think about it. I just do what they say. And that works right until it doesn't work.
It's destined not to work. Right?
Well, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was born in the church. Okay, so I was. But I'm also corporate grown. My father was a businessman, mother and all that. And then I spent some time in corporate America. So structure and that kind of thing, I understand it. And I hugely appreciate it. I really do. There is a church that I won't talk about whose governing structure I immensely respect it. Because it's just great. However, my concern is when the structure takes over the life that is not intended. Mm-hmm. And people are not a structure. We're not a government structure. You know, we can function within it, but that's not who we are. And part of me really feels very sensitive and hurt, really, when I see how that leaves people because, you know, it reproduces generationally. And just like you mentioned, a person says, okay, I'll let this out. I'll let the other person make the decision. Then you teach that mindset to your kids. Mm-hmm. And they don't make decisions. And then that goes, and, you know, it's just, we don't need to go. You understand what I'm saying.
I understand exactly what you're saying. And I'm sure there was nobody at the beginning of the Catholic Church who said, hey, let's have priests who are pedophiles. You know, that wasn't part of their organizing doctrine, but they put together the situation where that started happening and they didn't have a mechanism for stopping it. And then suddenly it was more important to keep the organization going than to do what any one of them individually would have said was right or wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, and yeah, organizationally, it kind of, you know, it came off the track there. And I won't pick on the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts of America, you know, same issue.
So, you know, okay. So the church that I was not going to mention, I'm going to mention.
Okay.
Okay.
It's that the United Methodist.
I was really struggling not to do it. I thought I could make the point without doing that. But it's the United Methodist Church, and I served in that church for quite a number of years. I highly, highly respect the structure and the way it works. Closest thing that I can see to a corporate environment, it's there. And then there's the spirituality underneath. So it's common knowledge that the United Methodist Church has split over the issue of homosexuality and leadership and so forth like that. Mm-hmm. And I was so hurt by that. Now I've been away from the United Methodist Church for a lot of years, but I still respected it. And the hurtful part to me is that the big argument is over the institutional stuff. You know, how are we going to handle the money, the property, the theology, and all of those mega headline things on the agenda? What about the basic fundamental issue of being in community and respecting others' choices and recognizing God in each other? What about that? And people are just totally, you know, run over because that little piece of what is important in our humanity is not considered. And so a whole institution splits, a marvelous institution splits, and maybe they become two marvelous institutions. Who knows? But do you know what I mean? It's like you're rail. So is it okay to come to this church and not this church? What? What the heck is wrong with you? Know what I mean? What does it matter? No, I'm not going there. I'm just saying there's a lot of things on the table that are judgmental that don't matter. We don't even know if it matters, if it's ever going to matter in eternity. We're not going to have anything to do with that anyway. So why am I going to hurt somebody, reject somebody over something that can't possibly matter? I will never know. Do you know what I mean? I don't have the last word. I only know how I'm supposed to treat you and help you grow. Anything other than that is wrong. But you split an institution over that, a marvelous institution. You split over a part of humanity that we should embrace. That's the spirituality that I'm talking about.
Bring it down to the fundamental question. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And some people can't let go of being right. How can I be in a thing where this sort of thing would happen? Whenever a problem comes up, when you run away from the problem, then the problem stays there. The problem comes up and you run towards the problem and you embrace the problem, then new solutions, new channels, new avenues, new possibilities start opening up. And I'm not going to come up with the answer for the United Methodist Church. And there are lots of other organizations that have run into the same sorts of challenges and issues and difficulties. And, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is like the philosophical founder of the New Thought movement, was a Unitarian minister. And he got thrown out. Actually kind of threw himself out and then burned the bridge with the last talk that he was allowed to give at Harvard Divinity School. He did an address there, and he's not coming back because it got to the point where he couldn't go along with something that had been part of the theology forever and ever and ever, and he had to make his own choice. So, was he out there? Was he different? Did he get ostracized? Probably. I mean, a lot of times we forget that because he wound up being Ralph Waldo Emerson. But, we're all at every point along the way making our choice. And if you're in an organization that's splitting, you got to decide because, it's going in two different directions and you're not going to be welcome in both.
Yeah, that's the reality. I understand that. I probably make the goofy mistake of saying, but you know what? This is not what it was meant to be. And
completely agree with that.
Look at the damage that's being done to another person. I love the way my husband sums it up, who is a United Methodist pastor. He says, just stand back and look at it. He said, it's their own kids they're fighting because, who else is it? This is a new generation and you're fighting against a new generation. They're your kids. What's wrong with you? So I thought that was so good.
That's wonderful. So he's undoubtedly very popular with one of the sides.
Yeah, well, they split, and he had to make his choice, and he made his choice for I call it liberalism. He made his choice because to us it's choosing for God. It's choosing God's way. Mm-hmm. And whatever. So to me, that's where spirituality and religion face each other, and never the twain shall meet sometime, I think.
Just sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take another break, and then when we come back, we're going to do a prayer, because that's what we always do at the end of a podcast episode. And the prayer is going to be one of those multi-purpose, jack-of-all-trade prayers on what would love do.
Yes.
It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at bethelight.com. That's b-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at bethelight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
Spiritual and not religious. So we are talking about the fine line between religion and spirituality. I sometimes describe it as using the metaphor of Arthur Murray dance lessons. You go to the Arthur Murray studio and they have the footprints on the floor, and you can learn to do the cha-cha by stepping onto the 1 and then the 2 and then the 3 and then the 4 and then the 5 and etc. And you move your feet that way, and that's how you do the dance. And it's a great learning tool. And there are other people who just go in and feel the music and get their own groove on, and they're just dancing. And the worst part about religion is like, here's the footsteps. This is how you're going to do the dance. And the worst part is people who will say, can you turn down the music because I'm trying to count here. It's like they have missed the point. And so there's a benefit to both of them. It's wonderful to have steps and a dance that you can do that you understand, because you can dance with other people. And we can get together and we're connecting, and we've got the music, and we've got the fact that we're going to be doing a waltz or a foxtrot or whichever dance we're going to be doing. And we all know what to expect and what our part is. And there's mutual understanding there. And there's also the opportunity to just get into the groove, and that's spirituality, and feel the connection and what that is. And there's a natural tension between spirituality, which is completely free form, of I'm going to do what the infinite is telling me to do, and doing a line dance because that's the leader said it's time to turn, so we're all going to turn. and there's value to both. And when we lose sight and we say, I've got to be doing what the dance leader says to do instead of following our heart, then we're missing a point. And we're missing out on deepening into our own awareness of our spiritual nature. So we're going to do a prayer now. And this is a wonderful prayer that lets us dive into a question. What would love do? Because as we say, there is only love. And started with a prayer. In the beginning, there was darkness and void and God. Or in the beginning, there was the singularity and the Big Bang began expanding. And everything comes from that one. Everything is that one creative source, that one infinite intelligence, that one divine presence sharing itself. That sharing of self, that level of creative expression is love itself. So this entire universe is an expression of love, of givingness, of okayness. The universe says yes. Let there be light. Yes, there is light. Let there be yes, and yes, and yes. And we are each participating in that process. So regardless of what the circumstance is that we are addressing, when we turn our awareness to that infinite creative power, that one divine presence that shares itself as everything, and recognize that that divine power and presence is not just available to us, it's not just in us, it is us, everything that we are. From center to circumference, everything, and everything in the world around us is that divine love unfolding. So when there's a choice, when there's a possibility, when we get to decide which is going to be the path that we're going to take, we can open ourselves up to that infinite intelligence that knows everything and say, what would love do? I am that love right here and right now. And as love, what is the next perfect step for me? What would love do now? And listen for the answer. Allow the infinite to tell us what that next step is. And then bring that into meditation and contemplation and say, is this who I am? Is this the part that's right for me? Is there anything more to be known? What would love do now? What am I now as love unfolding? And the infinite responds. The infinite will suggest to us what that next perfect step is. The infinite is sharing itself as us and makes known the path that's the most appropriate and uplifting and helpful for us to take. The wonderful thing is there's nothing that stands in the way of this. We can experience doubt, we can experience negativity, we can experience all of the human emotions. And once we let go of that, we release our attachment to thinking things ought to be the way that we said they ought to be. We let go of our attachment to being right and open to what's possible, what's new, what's next. And ask, what would love do as me in this situation? The clarity forms. Clarity. Unambiguous clarity on what that next perfect step is. And it's happening for each of us. As we engage in the process, that clarity makes itself known. That guidance is at hand, that wisdom is revealed. Those steps are made known, and we take them, bringing something new and wonderful and joyous into the world in partnership with the infinite. That's what's happening for each of us in our own way. I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the way that it's happening. I'm grateful for the goodness unfolding. And I'm so grateful to be able to speak this word of invitation, of opening, and to release it into that creative law that creates everything. And to know it is now creating this in a unique and different way for each of us. It is happening. It's happening now. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.